when we grew up, it was like the jack of all trades, you don't go any place.
Mm-hmm.
And in this day and age, you need to have more than one direction and one outlook.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath. So glad to have you here today. And visit our site at contrabassconversations.com to check out everything that's going on here. I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email. Tell me your story. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com will get you in touch with me. And I know you're going to love today's episode featuring Brandino. And Kevin Brandino Brandon is a 7-time Grammy awarded producer, composer, arranger, and multi-instrumental bassist. He and I got the chance to sit down right outside of the campus at University of Southern California. Beautiful day. We had lunch. We caught up. I feel like I've known him my entire life. Such a cool guy, such an interesting career. And we dig into all kinds of things on this interview, like playing with Aretha Franklin, will.i.am, Justin Timberlake, and OutKast. And the latter two collaborations resulted in Grammy Awards. We talk about the steps that go into applying for the Grammys. It's pretty onerous. The rise of synth bass in the 80s and what that did to the scene. Picking up composing during the union strike in the 80s and ending up winning 3 Emmys for writing for the show Santa Barbara. We also talk about building a studio, record production, and so many more topics. It was a great chat. We also feature tracks from the Many Faces of Brandino 2, which was nominated for 11 Grammy Awards and features collaborations with artists like Kamasi Washington, Michael O'Neill, Aaron Shaw, MC Nice, and many others. And we have a link in the show notes for this. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, and let you know a little bit about their Helicore strings, which are multi-stranded steel core strings. And like all D'Addario strings, Helicore bass strings are designed, engineered, and crafted in the USA at the D'Addario String Factory in New York. You can get Helicore in orchestral, hybrid, pizzicato, and solo string sets. And you can get all of them except the solo strings in light, medium, and heavy gauges. I'd also like to thank Rob Angelotti of Bass Capos for providing hosting for Contrabass Conversations. And Bass Capos are an excellent choice for any bass player looking to implement a double bass extension. They're easy to install, easy to adjust, cheaper and more reliable than hand-built latches. They're quick and light to operate. And you can learn more at basscapos.com. All right, here we go with our conversation with Brandino. Did you produce the album too? What was your, maybe just talk about your whole overall role behind the thing.
Okay, I wrote, produced, engineered, played bass.
Okay.
I pretty much did everything. I did the one-man band on this album, and it was my concept, which on some of the quotes and some of the reviews, that it was very eclectic. And what I did, I said I wanted to write an album that I could touch on musical styles that I've been doing for the last, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. So
it actually ended up being, as the album started developing and the main core of my group, and I went off, we recorded that. I actually wrote some other songs that went left and brought in guests of friends that I had met that actually worked out perfectly on on the songs, like Free Jazz was Kamasi Washington. Rocket was Michael Thompson, who's, studio. He's one of the great guitar players. And then one of my other friends on Bolero was Michael O'Neill, who's been with George Benson and doing, now he's doing Barbra Streisand gig. So when I actually looked up to do the credits, I actually had all these featured people that I featured on the album, which basically fit into what they do as instrumentalists and artists themselves. So when I did the credits and everything, I go, man, almost every song, everybody, all the friends that I brought in are featured on it. And rightfully so, because that's what they do, or that's their specialty. So when I looked at it, I go, geez, I can't believe this. I said, well, since we're in this 99 cents download and blah, 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 and all that, I said, well, let me put this record out. Let me see how it works. And I've got different responses across the board from different people, because If I Could Go Back was a rapper that I used to deal with 30 years ago that came on board, and one of the kids that I've been mentoring, Aaron's song, he just turned 21 on Friday last week.
Oh, wow.
And I've been dealing with him. His brother is the one that I got over at USC that recommended us to go to that restaurant.
Oh, yeah, right. Sure.
So his baby brother's a saxophone player, and I brought him in, and that song kind of went in that vein. So the album is really eclectic, because from a musical style, it's all over the place with hip-hop. I wouldn't say really smooth jazz, more hip-hop jazz.
Yeah.
And, with some Latin in it, and straight ahead, and some avant-garde jazz. So it's all over the place. I was able to get, when I did the CD submission, I was able to get 11 out of the 13 categories that I put each song in.
Uh-huh.
I was able to get 11 categories out of 13. Everybody was telling me, well, you hit the mark. And I said, well, I haven't hit the mark unless I get in the nomination scenario. But when that came out, I was competing with major record companies. And I go, well, there's no way I could trump that, because there's too much money, dealing with Verb, Concord,
sure,
blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was like all major labels. I go, yeah, this is, I can't compete with them, but everybody told me, look, you got 11 out of 13, and most people don't even make the CD submission.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, as far as we're concerned, you hit a home run in 11 categories.
Yeah, right.
So I just left it like that, and I said, okay, well, we'll see what happens next time. That's the Overlook of the album. And I'm still getting, people still coming at me about the album and all that. So, it's taking its course. And obviously, I was Chuck Rainey when he first heard it. He said, you need to submit this to the Grammys, And it really was because of him that I did that, because he said, look, I've been on the Grammy board in Texas for 10 years. And I haven't heard an album in 10 years that sounded this good. He says, you really have to do that. And I said, well, you got my back on it? He goes, yeah. He says, I got your back on it. So I went ahead and went through all of the trial and tribulations, submitting it and all the stuff you have to do, which is a very long process.
Yeah, what all do you have to do? Most of the people listening to this probably wouldn't have the first clue how that system works. What are the steps in submitting to the Grammys?
Well, you have to be in the Grammy Association or NARAS. That's number one. Then number two, basically you have to fill all the forms out, go through all how the Grammy thing is set up, which basically took really a 2-week learning curve to figure out what you can do, what you can't do, all that. I mean, there's a lot of stipulations, and if you don't do the right thing, they just basically disqualify you.
Okay.
So you have to go through all that, all the rules and regulations for that. Then from that situation, basically once they accept you to submit stuff, it has to be done on a timely manner, and you have to press up CDs. I think I had to do 48 CDs to give to them so they can put it out to the appropriate people that are going to listen to see if they'll even let you be in any of the categories for submission. Also, you have to go get an RISC code as a manufacturer for your company. Then from there, you've got to do that, and you've got to register. The way that we did it was a digital submission. So then now you have to get, I got TuneCore that was recommended by my rapper to submit, so that basically there's a release date, and they can see that you have a digital distribution from a major digital distribution company, so that you're qualified for that. So it's all that. And then usually you have to get a distribution company for radio play, which there really isn't very many, or there really isn't any in the United States for jazz. The only one that there is Canada. And supposedly Canada has 166 stations, but that never happened because it only got to 14 stations out of 166. So I don't know what that's about, or if it's a fault on the distributor and all that. But this is the new way of doing business in 2016 with all the internet companies, and everybody's selling you, a song and a dance. So all that was a learning curve. But the bottom line is what everybody has told me is that I got 11 categories submitted when everybody started doing the voting scenario within the Grammy Association. And it's funny, Jason, because I've got all these people from New York asking to be my friend or following me, and it's really funny. And I go, wow, it's a trip. But it's all these New Yorkers have been saying, I'm following you, blah, 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 all this. So it's like maybe Swamp Dogg Blues did it to them, coming from New Orleans. Yeah. Maybe that hit really home because vaudeville started there, not in New York like all people think.
Yeah. Man, it's such an eclectic album. Yeah, I feel that like New Orleans tinge to it, like obviously like Swamp Dogg Blues, but man, yeah, it is a fascinating mix of styles. I love it.
Well, good. I'm glad that you do, because I had more originally, and I talked to one of my friends and I go, I got a headache, and I go, why? And I said, man, I've listened to my album. I got like 15, 16 songs. I can't digest it, man. It's too much music, man. Mm-hmm. And we started laughing. He goes, I was about to tell you that. So I finally trimmed it down to basically 12, and for some reason I thought I had to have 13 songs, so I put the 13th song on it. But originally I had it ending with Aaron's song, which was the 12th song on the album. So it went the way that it is, and me looking at the album and listening to it, musicians that I've known, like all the guys that were on Jay Leno Tonight Show, Ricky Minor, Paul Jackson Jr., Wayne Lindsey, all my friends that I've known for years, they really dug it, obviously because they know me, but they were able to handle the music diversity on the album, which is really hard to deal with unless you do a lot of different styles, going from Actual Proof and Tell Me a Bedtime Story, which was Herbie Hancock, going to Bolero, which is basically a Spanish love song, and then going to free jazz with Kamasi Washington, avant-garde jazz, like it's all over the place. Right. But that's what and that's how I ended up writing the record. And I said, well, let me go with it. I ain't getting no younger, so I might as well put out what I want. Right. And see what happens.
Yeah, well, I could see how the talk show guys, like the Tonight Show band guys, would connect with that, because that's what they do, right? I mean, they're doing one style, then totally different style, like that.
Yep. Paul Jackson Jr., the guitar god, as we call him here in L.A., he goes, man, that 6-string bass, I didn't know you did this, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, how long have you been doing it? I said, I've been doing that as long as I've known you, Paul. Well, I've never really heard you do that. Well, that's because the bottom line is, I didn't really get called for playing 6-string bass, and most bass players don't get called for that unless it's a specialty item on a record or it's a solo record. Yeah. Yeah. As a functional bass player, basically, I started making 5- and 6-string in the mid-'70s, and I know there's not really a debate, but I had to talk to GHS Strings about that, because they had told me at the timeline was that Anthony Jackson was going to them making a heavy set of GHS strings, and I had the medium gauge for my 6-string bass. So it was all like, well, who made the first 6-string bass and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'm the first bass player that's a bass player as a manufacturer that made my own 6-string bass. Mm-hmm. So that kind of set that scenario wherever it will set. Because I couldn't have companies make that instrument for me. They thought I was crazy. And I go, well, I've been playing bass since I was 9 years old. Now I'm with Aretha Franklin, and I said, mid-70s, I said, I'm bored with the range of a 4-string bass. It's got to get wider. We got to go higher and lower. So that went to where it did. And, now the explosion, Jason, with the 21-string bass and all that. I go,
right.
You guys got it. I ain't trying to go there, whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing how that's become kind of it's such a standard part of what we do now. But yeah, you were out there pioneering it in the mid 70s.
Well, yeah, I asked Jimmy Johnson when I met him when he came in town, and I saw him play his Olympic 5-string at $2 Bill, which was a Scientology kind of jazz club back in the day. And I said, man, I'm looking for a high string. And he goes, what, do you make it a 6-string? I go, yeah. He goes, and he looked at me kind of crazy. And he goes, called David Holcomb at GHS Strings. So I called him, used Jimmy's name, and I said, I make my own instruments. And he goes, well, give me the measurements of your bridge, the width, blah, blah, blah. And then I talked to Seymour Duncan, which I had met working with the Beach Boys, recording with them. And he started making prototype pickups for me from the dimensions of the width of my necks.
Yeah.
Which they varied between a jazz style and a precision style. So all that kind of went on, and back then it was a lot of money, but there was nobody making pickups. And there was really nobody making strings. So everything was carte blanche because you were having manufacturers stopping what they're doing and retooling their machines, either winding bobbins or actually making up strings, actually taking one of their machines and setting aside to make up sets of strings for you, or making pickups for you, which was obviously not normal, their normal protocol. So you had to pay for that.
I'll bet. Yeah, that's not a cheap proposition. Yeah, trying to get a shop to change their production line to get that out. Man, what an interesting era.
Yep. Well, everybody was kind of looking for that, and it's funny because all the kids I deal with now that I've kind of mentor, they've played all these old instruments I have, and they're losing their mind. And they buy all the mod basses and sire basses and all that. And well, it doesn't sound like your instruments. I go, well, now you got one piece mahogany body that's shaped like a Fender. That's 35 years old, and now you got a neck that's one piece maple, not joined together, like with all the Korean, Chinese instruments that they got two slabs of maple that they put together with a seam in the middle. You've got a one piece maple neck that's curly maple that you order like that. And with ebony, and I said all the instruments basically are 35 years old, 40 years old. So now it's almost like it's like an upright. And I go, well, that's why it sounds the way it does. And it goes, well, they don't even have a preamp. Well, you don't need a preamp because look at the wood factor. You got mahogany bodies. You got, real ebony fingerboards, and you got real, maple neck, curly maple neck for the actual back of the neck. It's like an old string bass. You get a string bass, 35 years old compared to a new instrument. The difference is night and day automatically. You know that. Yeah, that's a good point, because I think people think that they're going to just be able to manipulate it with the electronics on the instrument. But if you start with that actual wood sound, you don't the preamp's less necessary. I mean, it makes a huge difference. I was talking to this manufacturer up in upstate New York talking about making electric uprights, and it was the same thing we were talking about, like what a difference the wood makes. Well, I'm gonna shoot a picture and send you a bass that I made. Well, late 70s, and it's like a stick bass or whatever, one of those electric bass. It sounds like Ron Carter. I use it live because I don't have to worry about the acoustics of the room. Yeah. If it's wood floor, concrete walls or whatever. And it's been a proven scenario since then that every time I play that bass, they can always hear it in a unit or in a group. And it's a 200-year-old Italian neck that I got from a Luther. I don't know, you might know who he is, but Bob Doherty. I met him originally when he moved from New York to come to L.A., and I bought that neck from him, and it's about a 200-year-old neck, and it's got Amati, the Italian Amati tuning keys on it that I know you just can't buy those. So there's no way to really know what it was, but when Bob sold it to me, he told me the body looked like a jigsaw that got in an accident. The body was completely crushed, and it looked like a jigsaw puzzle, and there was no way to restore it. It would never hold up under those constraints. So it was sitting on his wall. I bought it from him, and I had devised a 5-string bass back then that was, a semi-electric acoustic, trying to model it off of John Hurd, because John Hurd had a Tyrolean bass, a real old Tyrolean bass, that was a 5-string that he said that originally when he was in San Francisco, he bought it from a store out there, and it was actually Red Mitchell, one of Red Mitchell's basses.
Oh, wow.
And so when I heard that bass originally, it was the only bass I heard from a jazz player that was playing with a low B. So I told him I can't buy a bass because I couldn't find one. And so I made my own, which was basically an electric upright, recorded several albums with that because of the sound of the instrument, made the new version probably in 2004 or 2005, 10 years ago. I went back to the same guy, did an upgrade from the original, but the thing sounds the same. We don't know why it sounds like that because there's only one bass in the world that sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we contribute because that 200-year-old neck, which is one piece wood, and it's a pretty thick neck. We figured that the sound, there's really no body, so we figured the sound is really coming off of the neck of the instrument. I kind of go between 4 basses. I got a Grunart that I got 2 years ago that I happened to get lucky with. So, one of those from Germany. Mm-hmm. And I go between a 5-string Eastman bass that I got one of the good 5-strings, really good.
Yeah.
It's one of a kind also. And my 100-year-old, whatever it is, jazz 4-string and that 5-string, electric acoustic bass that I told you about. I kind of go between those 4 instruments.
Yeah, Eastman makes some nice basses. I've played a whole bunch of their basses. Aren't they based out in Los Angeles now? Didn't they move out there?
Yeah. They moved. When I met them at the NAMM show, they were at Baltimore, but they were moving to Pomona. Mm-hmm. And Ruben Salazar and Jason Toriano, who's a bass player, mm-hmm. classical bass player, they told me to wait until they would ship all their stock. So it took about 6 months after the NAMM show. And they finally were in Pomona, went out there, and Jason showed me a couple of instruments and all that.
Okay.
And it took a while, with a new instrument. It took, with John Peterson, Luther out here in L.A., we went back about 4 years with 4 different sets of strings, trying to find the right strings that work with the instrument. But it finally worked out.
Okay, what are you using on it? What are the strings that ended up working for you on that?
Yeah, I've been using the Kaplans. They actually came out with prototypes, which I've been trying to have them make prototypes again, which is real hard to do, mm-hmm. obviously because of the sellability. But I was able to get a low B for my 5-string, mm-hmm. and I was able to get a high C for my cello bass.
Okay.
In a Kaplan. They work real good. They really work good on newer instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And the sound, they sound like an old string. They make a new instrument sound old. And I've recorded with Justin Timberlake, with, will.i.am, all those different people using Kaplans. And they don't know the difference,
Yeah.
As long as the bass sounds good, they don't come out, well, how old is your instrument?
Right. You've done so much on the bass, and then I look at this new album, and you're doing everything behind the scenes for this, and you're writing, you're producing, you're mixing. When did you get into the whole production side of things? When did that start for you?
Okay, well, there's a teacher out here, a legendary teacher, Spud Murphy, equal interval system that Benny Maupin, Herbie Hancock, all of them have studied from them. Mm-hmm. When we had the union strike in 78 or 79, I think it was Tuesday Production that had a jingle house. And it went down that the union couldn't supervise that company because realistically, under, I guess, the law, the private company could hire who they wanted and they could actually do music without being under the union contract.
Okay.
Subsequently, that opened up a door for the Synclavier to come in. And when 84, 85, when Thriller came in with feeling games playing synth bass. You know, I was talking to Nathan Easton and Abraham Laboriel. Basically, we never saw each other on record dates anymore. And that whole explosion went through. So a good friend of mine, Anthony Marinelli, who's a film composer, he told me, can you write? I said, well, I used to write when I was in high school. In college, he goes, man, you need to write. So I went to this teacher, started writing. And he had a very interesting concept of how to write, which threw all the regular rules of diatonic harmony out the door. And I started doing that, and I started writing for Santa Barbara, which I got 3 Emmys for writing music for that show, 85, 86, and 92. So I got into that, built my own studio, started doing it, and I was doing record production as production during that time also for MCA and for Capitol Records with a partner, a friend of mine that was a piano player with Aretha at that time, because we were doing Aretha's gig and doing production. So I got into that whole thing, Jason, and was always electronically inclined. So as we got taken off of records, I went into writing music for TV and for writing for records and doing that whole production thing.
Brandino, we in the house. MC Nice. This is that, back in the day in the jungle with the brothers with the backpack full of rap facts and graffiti. Before Tahiti was a place to go and a good life a place to flow. We were checking the rhyme where the groove was crushed.
Well, I like you describing getting the flow of the album right? So it takes you like on a journey, like something that you can sit and, like you're saying, do some work, and you have like a satisfying journey through the music. That's an art, trying to figure out.
Yeah, well, my friend Thomas Stones did that because, you know, he was thinking outside the box, and he told me it took him. He was part of one of the engineers that helped mix the album, but with myself and Milton Gutierrez. You know, but he's good at that. And I said, hey, man, you come up with it. I'm fried.
Yeah,
I can't think anymore, man.
Yeah.
I'm fried on this. And he came and said, I sat back there, and I think he did a couple of days. He said, I got the format, and I listened to it, and I finally sat down one day drinking coffee, and I listened to it, and I go, yeah, this works. Because you're able to digest it in the order that it comes in, without you turning it off, because it takes you through a journey. And he was responsible for it. I said, you did a great job, man, because I don't listen to albums like that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really have that focus point. You listen to a lot of music, a lot of different genres. He's classically trained because me and him studied with the same flute teacher out of Watts when we were 13, you know, classical flute. So he has all that aptitude and all that musical knowledge. So I said, hey, I said, Thomas, you did a great job. You know, and it worked. And everybody that heard it said it worked.
Hey, man, I got to congratulate you for this, though. It's musically wonderful, and it's just exciting what you're doing and what you've done. I mean, you've had such a fascinating career already, and it seems like you're just getting going. I mean, you got so many irons in the fire. It's really exciting.
Well, they say in this day, when we grew up, it was like the jack of all trades, you don't go any place. When we grew up, that was always in the back of our mind, learn the craft. And in this day and age, you need to have more than one direction and one outlook. You know, it's totally changed. The concept has totally changed from where it was originally to where it is now, because you have to have 5 streams of income. You need to have, you know, different people working for you. You need, you know, it's like that. You can't have enough things in the eye, you know, in the fires.
Thank you so much, Brandino. So great to catch up with you. And folks, check out everything he's up to at BrandinoSoundbox.com. And that's going to do it for another episode of Contrabass Conversations. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, contrabassconversations.com/subscribe will get you connected. There are all the different options listed there. You can also get our free app for Windows, for Android, for iOS at contrabassconversations.com/app. And if you're interested in supporting this endeavor in any way, financially or otherwise, all those options are listed at contrabassconversations.com/support. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.